Before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us grow and keeps these stories coming. You're listening to Almost Alone, where we share real stories submitted by viewers. Every account you hear comes from someone who wrote in to tell their experience. For privacy, all names and details are changed unless permission is explicitly given. Tonight's stories take place during the holidays, a time when neighborhoods go quiet, houses sit empty, and the people who watch know exactly when you're alone. Christmas is supposed to feel safe. Warm lights, locked doors, family close by. But for the people in these stories, the season became something else entirely. A time when someone used the chaos of travel and tradition to get closer than they ever should have. If you're listening alone tonight, maybe check the locks before we start. I've always been a planner when it comes to Christmas. By the second week of December, every gift is ordered, wrapped, and hidden in the hall closet. I like being done early. It makes the season feel calm instead of chaotic. While everyone else is fighting crowds and refreshing shipping trackers, I'm drinking coffee and watching the snow fall. That year, I was living alone for the first time. A small rental house at the end of a quiet street. 2 bedrooms, a narrow yard, and a porch just big enough for a chair and a welcome mat. My neighbors were mostly older couples who kept to themselves. The kind of block where nothing ever happened and everyone liked it that way. The packages started arriving around December 8th. I worked from home most days, so I was usually there to answer the door. The first few deliveries were normal, quick handoffs, no small talk. Drivers already turning back to their trucks before I could say thank you. I'd sign or wave, grab the box, and forget about it. Then I started noticing the same guy. He was younger than most of the drivers I'd seen. Late 20s maybe. Average height, thin build, brown hair pushed back under a cap. The kind of face you'd forget immediately if you passed him on the street. The first time I really registered him, he smiled and said, "Lot of boxes this week." I laughed and said something about holiday shopping. He lingered for a second longer than necessary, eyes drifting past me into the hallway, then nodded and walked back to his truck. The next day, he was back with another package. 2 days in a row, he said. "You must be the organized type." I smiled politely, thanked him, and closed the door. I didn't think much of it. Drivers probably notice patterns. That's their whole job. Routes, schedules, addresses. Maybe he was just making conversation to pass the time. But by the third delivery in 4 days, I started feeling something I couldn't name. He always seemed to arrive when I was home. Always had a comment ready. Little things that felt just slightly too observant for a stranger handing me cardboard boxes. "Saw the car in the driveway yesterday," he said once, glancing at my sedan parked by the curb. "Figured you were working from home." Another time, "Lights were on late last night. Couldn't sleep?" I laughed it off. I told myself I was being paranoid. He was just chatty. Some people are like that. Doesn't mean anything. But I started noticing that he never said these things to my neighbors. I watched once from my window when he dropped something off next door. He didn't smile, didn't linger, just left the box and walked away. Then, on December 14th, I came home from running errands and found a package on the porch, normal enough. But tucked underneath the box was a folded piece of paper. It was a delivery slip, the kind drivers leave when no one's home. In the notes section, someone had written in neat, careful handwriting, "Missed you today, didn't expect you to leave." My stomach tightened. I read the note again, hoping I'd misunderstood. I looked up and down the street. No truck. No one around. Just the wind pushing dead leaves along the gutter and the sky already dimming toward dusk. I brought the package inside and locked the door behind me. The note could have been a joke, I told myself. Drivers probably get bored. Maybe he thought it was funny. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But the phrasing sat with me. Didn't expect you to leave. Not you weren't home. Not sorry I missed you. Something about those words felt less like customer service and more like surveillance. The next morning, when I opened my front door to grab the newspaper, there was another package, this time placed directly against the door instead of the usual spot near the steps. The delivery slip was tucked under the flap of the box. Home today. Good. I didn't laugh this time. I stood there in my pajamas, cold air on my face, looking at those two words. The handwriting was the same. Neat, deliberate, patient. I called the shipping company and asked to speak to someone about a driver. The customer service rep was polite but unhelpful. She said they couldn't share driver information, but she would note my concern. She asked if I wanted to leave a formal complaint. I didn't know what to complain about. That he smiled too long, that his notes felt creepy. I said I just wanted a different driver on my route. She said she'd pass it along. For the next 2 days, no packages came. I thought maybe he'd been reassigned. Maybe someone had flagged him. I started to relax. Then, on the evening of December 18th, I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anything. I hadn't ordered anything. When I looked through the peephole, no one was there. I waited, heart beating a little faster than it should have, watching the distorted fisheye view of my empty porch. Nothing moved. After a full minute, I cracked the door open and looked around. No truck, no box, no one walking away, just cold air and the faint hum of the streetlight clicking on. I stepped outside to check behind the bushes near the stairs, thinking maybe someone had left something out of view. That's when I saw it, a single boot print in the frost on the porch, right next to the window beside my front door. Not facing the door, facing the glass. The curtain on that window was thin. At night, with the lamp on, you could see straight into my living room. Someone had stood there and looked inside. I went back into the house and locked every door. I checked every window, pulled every curtain shut, and sat in the kitchen with my phone in my hand, trying to decide whether this was worth calling the police over. What would I even say? A delivery driver left weird notes and someone knocked on my door. There were no threats, no damage, no proof of anything except a boot print and a bad feeling. I didn't call. That night I barely slept. Every sound in the house made me sit up. The heater clicking on, a branch brushing the siding outside my window, the ice maker dropping cubes. I kept imagining footsteps on the porch, a face in the glass. The next morning, December 19th, I decided to stay at my sister's for a few days. I couldn't explain exactly why, just that the house didn't feel right anymore, like the walls were thinner than they used to be. Before I left, I set up an old phone on the living room shelf, propped against a stack of books, running a basic motion detection app I downloaded months ago and never used, just in case. I locked up, double-checked the back door, and drove to my sister's. She lived about 40 minutes away in a bigger town. I told her I just wanted company for the holidays. She didn't push. We made cookies, watched movies, and I almost forgot why I'd come. The first night there, I checked the camera app before bed. Nothing. Same for the second night. The feed showed my dark, empty living room. No motion, no alerts. On the third night, December 21st, I opened the app around midnight out of habit. There was a notification, a recording from earlier that evening. I tapped it. The footage was dark, just the faint glow of the streetlight filtering through the blinds. For the first few seconds, nothing moved. Then the front door opened, slowly, carefully, just wide enough for a figure to step inside. I couldn't see details, just a silhouette, a man's build. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, head turning slightly as if scanning the room. Then he stepped further in, moving past the edge of the camera's view. The recording ran for another 3 minutes. No movement, no sound, just stillness. There was no footage of him leaving. I called the police immediately. An officer met me at the house an hour later. When we went inside, everything looked untouched. Nothing stolen, no obvious damage. But the officer pointed out that the lock on the back door had fresh scratches around the keyhole. Someone had picked it. They searched the house, every room, every closet. No one hiding, no one waiting. But one officer paused when he came out of my bedroom hallway. "You said you packed a bag before you left," he said. I nodded. "There's a suitcase on your bed, open." I hadn't left anything on the bed. I hadn't even opened that suitcase. I walked to the doorway and looked in. It was my suitcase, the black one I kept in the closet. Inside were my own clothes, shirts, jeans, a hoodie, folded neatly, like someone was preparing a trip for me. Underneath the clothes was a small wrapped gift box with a red bow. The officers told me not to open it. They took it for evidence. I never found out what was inside. They wouldn't say. I moved out by January, broke my lease, didn't look back. The police never identified the man. The shipping company said they had no record of any complaints about the driver I described, and no driver matching that description currently worked my route. But a detective called me a few weeks later. He said they'd pulled delivery logs and cross-referenced stops. One driver had logged an unusual number of visits to my street, far more than the packages I'd actually received. He asked if I remembered seeing anyone parked near my house. A truck idling, a man standing on the sidewalk. I said no, but that wasn't entirely true, because now that I think about it, I do remember seeing a white delivery truck near my block a few times. Engine running, no flashers, just sitting there even when I hadn't ordered anything. I didn't think about it then. It was December. Everyone was getting packages. My aunt and uncle asked me to house sit the week before Christmas. They were flying to Colorado to spend the holidays with my cousins, and they didn't want to leave the house completely empty or the cat unfed. I said yes without much thought. Their place was nice, a 2-story colonial at the end of a cul-de-sac in a suburb about 20 minutes from my apartment. Big yards, mature trees, the kind of neighborhood where everyone has matching mailboxes and waves when they drive past. I figured it would be a quiet week, some time away from my cramped apartment, a change of scenery. What I didn't realize until I got there was how empty that street would be. My aunt mentioned it casually as she handed me the keys. "Most of the neighbors are traveling this year," she said. "The Hendersons are in Florida. The Marquets went to their daughter's place. The Cohens are doing a cruise. And the house across the street has been for sale since September. No one's living there." She said it like it was a good thing. No one to bother me, no noise, total peace and quiet. For the first 2 nights it was. The house was big and unfamiliar, but I settled in. I fed the cat, an old gray tabby named Simon who mostly ignored me, watched TV in the living room, and slept in the guest bedroom at the back of the house. The neighborhood was so quiet, I could hear the wind moving through the trees. On the third day, I came back from grabbing groceries and noticed something small but wrong. The welcome mat was crooked, not dramatically, just shifted about an inch to the left, like someone had stepped on the corner and pushed it off center. I stared at it for a moment, then told myself I'd probably done it that morning without noticing. I straightened it and went inside. That night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to a sound I couldn't identify. A dull thud, like something heavy being set down, somewhere in the house. I lay there in the dark, heart beating too fast, waiting to hear it again. Nothing. just the hum of the heater cycling on and the wind scraping a branch against the window. I convinced myself it was the cat knocking something over. Simon was old, but he still had bursts of energy. I rolled over and eventually fell back asleep. The next morning I found Simon hiding under the couch. He wouldn't come out, not even for food. I crouched down and looked at him. His eyes were wide, ears flat. Something had scared him. I walked through the house, checking windows and doors. Everything was locked, nothing out of place. I laughed at myself for being paranoid and left for work. I had a part-time shift at a bookstore across town. When I came back that afternoon, the welcome mat was crooked again. I stopped on the porch and stared at it. I had straightened it that morning. I remembered doing it. I'd even pressed the corner down with my foot before locking the door. I stepped inside slowly, key still in my hand, listening for anything out of place. The house was silent. Simon was hiding again. In the kitchen, I noticed the dish towel hanging off the oven handle. I'd draped it there loosely that morning. Now it was folded in thirds, tucked neatly over the bar. A small thing, easily explained, but I hadn't done it. I opened the fridge. One of the leftover containers I hadn't touched, a Tupperware of pasta my aunt had left, was on a different shelf than where I remembered putting it. My chest felt tight. These were small details, tiny inconsistencies. Nothing I could point to and say, this proves someone was here. But I knew. Deep down, in the part of my brain that had kept humans alive for thousands of years, I knew something was wrong. That night, I set up a test. I placed a thin strip of tape across the bottom of the front door and the back door, low enough that you wouldn't notice, unless you were looking. The doors opened, the tape would break. I also wedged a small piece of paper between my bedroom door and the frame. If someone pushed it open during the night, paper would fall. I barely slept. When I woke up the next morning, the tape on both doors was intact, but the paper by my bedroom door was on the floor. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time staring at it. The door was still closed. The window was locked. There was no other way into the room, except through the hallway. Someone had opened my door during the night, then closed it again. I walked through the house, checking every room, every closet. I even forced myself into the basement, which I'd been avoiding since I arrived. Concrete floor, old boxes, a water heater that groaned in the corner. Nothing, no one. But someone had been there. I called my aunt. I tried to keep my voice calm. I didn't want to ruin her trip. "Does anyone else have a key to the house?" I asked. She thought for a moment. "No, just us and you." Then she paused. "Actually, we did give a spare to the last person who house sit for us, a few years ago. He was a neighbor's son. I think he moved away after college. I'm sure he returned it, but honestly, I can't remember." I asked for his name. She couldn't recall. Said she'd ask my uncle and get back to me. She never did. That night, I wedged a chair under the guest room doorknob. I left the bathroom light on down the hall. I lay in bed with my phone in my hand, ears straining at every creak and settle of the old house. Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps. Not the creak of old wood. Footsteps, soft, deliberate. Moving down the hallway toward my room, I stopped breathing. The footsteps paused outside my door. Through the gap at the bottom, I could see two shadows, feet, standing still. The bathroom light was on behind them, casting just enough glow to make out the shape. Someone was standing right outside my door. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. My thumb hovered over the emergency call button, but I couldn't bring myself to press it. I was frozen. After what felt like a full minute, the shadows shifted. The footsteps moved away. I heard the soft click of a door somewhere else in the house. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. At first light, I grabbed my bag and left without checking anything. I didn't want to know what I might find. I sat in my car at the end of the driveway, shaking, and called the police. An officer arrived 20 minutes later. He walked through the house with me, checking every room. That's when we found the attic access panel in the hallway ceiling. It was slightly ajar, pushed up from the inside. The officer climbed up with a flashlight. In the far corner of the attic, hidden behind a stack of old boxes and a rolled-up rug, was a sleeping bag, a pillow, a duffel bag full of clothes, and a small plastic bin. Inside the bin were photographs, photos of me, taken through the windows of the house. One of me sitting on the couch watching TV, the lamp casting a glow on my face. One of me standing at the kitchen sink, washing dishes. One of me asleep in the guest room, blanket pulled up to my chin, completely unaware. The officer asked how long I'd been staying there. I told him 5 days. He looked at the sleeping bag, then back at me. "This setup looks older than that," he said. "Whoever was here, I don't think they just showed up this week." The investigation didn't lead anywhere. No usable fingerprints. No DNA match in the system. My aunt said she hadn't been in the attic in over a year. The neighbor's son, the one who'd had the spare key, had moved out of state 2 years earlier. The police contacted him. He said he'd return the key when he left. Maybe he did. Maybe someone made a copy first. I don't know. What I do know is that someone had been living in that attic. Maybe before I arrived. Maybe for weeks. Watching through the vents. Coming down at night when I was asleep. I think about it sometimes. Those 5 nights I spent in that house, thinking I was alone. Every morning I'd wake up and walk through the quiet rooms, never once looking up at the ceiling. And just a few feet above me, behind a thin panel of drywall, someone was listening to me breathe, waiting for the street to empty, waiting for the right time. And when I left, I wonder if they were disappointed, or if they just started waiting for the next person to come stay. My family has a tradition of spending Christmas at my grandparents' cabin. It's about 2 hours north of where I grew up, deep in the woods, surrounded by pine trees and silence. No neighbors for miles, no cell service, just a long dirt road, a frozen lake you can see from the porch, and the kind of quiet that presses against your ears. I always loved it growing up. It felt like stepping out of time. No screens, no noise, just family and firelight and snow piled up outside the windows. This happened the year I was 23. That Christmas, it was just me, my mom, my dad, and my younger brother Jake. My grandparents had passed a few years earlier, but we kept the tradition going anyway. The cabin was ours now, and none of us were ready to let it go. We arrived late in the afternoon on December 22nd, just as the sun was starting to sink behind the trees. The cabin was cold. It always took a full day for the old wood stove to really heat the place, but we didn't mind. Jake and I hauled firewood from the shed while my parents unpacked groceries and swept out the dust. By nightfall, the place was warm and glowing, string lights wrapped around the porch railing and a fire crackling in the main room. The first night passed without incident. We played cards, drank hot chocolate, and fell asleep early. The silence out there was always deep, the kind that swallows your voice if you step outside. I'd forgotten how dark it got. No street lights, no glow from nearby houses, just black sky and stars. The second night, Christmas Eve, started the same way. We had dinner together, laughed at old stories, and my dad read "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" out loud like he always did, even though Jake and I were way too old for it. Around 11, everyone went to bed. I stayed up a little longer. I liked the quiet. I sat by the window in the main room with a book. The fire burned down to embers, just enough light to read by. That's when I saw it. At the far edge of the yard, right where the snow met the tree line, there was a figure. At first, I thought it was a deer. We saw them sometimes, especially at dusk. But the longer I looked, the more clearly I could see it wasn't an animal. It was a person, standing completely still, facing the cabin. I set the book down and leaned closer to the glass. The moon was bright enough to cast shadows on the snow, and I could make out the shape. Tall, wearing dark clothes, not moving. No breath visible in the cold air. No shifting of weight. Just stillness. I told myself it was a shadow, a trick of the moonlight, maybe a fence post I'd forgotten about. But there was no fence out there. I knew this property. I'd spent every Christmas here since I was a kid. I grabbed a flashlight from the shelf near the door and stepped onto the porch. The cold hit me immediately, sharp, biting, the kind that makes your lungs tighten. I aimed the beam toward where I'd seen the figure. Nothing. Just snow and trees and the black shapes of branches swaying slightly in the wind. I swept the flashlight across the entire tree line. No movement, no tracks that I could see from the porch. I went back inside, locked the door, and checked the back door too. Everything was secure. I didn't tell anyone. It was Christmas Eve. I didn't want to ruin it. The next morning, Christmas Day, was perfect. We opened presents, made a big breakfast, watched old movies on the little TV my dad had rigged up with a DVD player. I kept glancing at the window, but there was nothing outside except white. By the time we went to bed that night, I'd almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Then I woke up at 3 a.m. I don't know what pulled me out of sleep. Not a sound exactly. Just a feeling. The kind that makes you open your eyes and hold your breath without knowing why. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling. Then I got up to get water. On my way back from the kitchen, I passed the window I'd been sitting by the night before. I glanced out. The figure was back, closer this time. It was standing maybe 30 feet from the cabin in the middle of the yard, completely motionless. I could see more detail now. A long dark coat, what looked like boots, no visible face. The moon cast a faint shadow behind them on the snow. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The figure didn't move either. I stood there for what felt like 5 full minutes, watching, waiting for it to shift, to turn, walk away. It didn't. Finally, I stepped back from the window and went to wake my dad. He came out with a flashlight and his old hunting rifle. When he looked through the window, the yard was empty. "You sure you weren't dreaming?" he asked. I was sure. We checked outside anyway. This time there were footprints, a single set, coming out of the tree line, stopping about 30 feet from the cabin, then turning and going back into the woods. My dad followed them to the edge of the trees, but he wouldn't go farther in the dark. He said it was probably a hiker who got turned around, maybe someone from one of the other properties up the mountain, but there were no other properties for miles. We all knew that. He stayed up the rest of the night, rifle across his lap, watching the window. I didn't sleep either. The next morning, December 26th, we decided to leave a day early. No one said it directly, but the mood had shifted. The cabin didn't feel the same anymore. The silence that used to feel peaceful now felt like something else, like something waiting. While my parents loaded the car, I walked the perimeter of the yard in the daylight, looking at the footprints more closely. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen in the dark. There was a second set of tracks, older, partially filled in with blown snow, leading around the side of the cabin. They stopped directly beneath my bedroom window. I crouched down and looked at the glass. There were faint marks in the frost on the outside of the pane, smudges, finger-shaped, like someone had cupped their hands against the window to peer inside. My bed was right beneath that window. I'd slept there for 3 nights. I didn't tell my parents. I just helped finish packing, and we left. We never went back to that cabin. A few months later, In early spring, my dad drove up alone to check on the property. He was thinking about selling it. Too many memories, he said. Too far from everything. He called me that night. His voice was off. Flat, careful, like he was trying not to alarm me. He said when he arrived, the front door was standing open, not broken, not forced, just open, like someone had used a key or like the latch had been worked so many times it finally gave up. Inside, things were moved. The furniture was rearranged, not drastically, but noticeably. The couch was against a different wall. The kitchen table had been pushed closer to the window. The wood stove had been used recently. There was fresh ash inside, and a faint smell of smoke in the air. He walked through every room, calling out, half expecting someone to answer. No one did. But when he got to the bedroom I'd slept in, the one at the back of the cabin, he found something. Behind the headboard, hidden unless you pulled the bed away from the wall, someone had carved into the wood 5 tally marks, straight vertical lines, scratched deep into the paneling with something sharp. He said it looked deliberate, patient, like someone keeping count. We don't know how long someone had been watching that cabin. We don't know if they lived in the woods nearby, or followed us from town, or had been squatting in the building between our visits. But I think about it every December. I think about standing at that window in the dark, staring at a shape that was staring back at me. I think about the footprints leading to my window and the finger marks on the glass. And I think about those 5 tally marks on the wall, one for each year we visited after my grandparents died. Someone had been counting, watching us come and go, waiting in the trees. And every Christmas, when the lights go up and the nights get long, I wonder if they're still out there somewhere, still watching, still waiting, still counting. Before we go, remember, the holidays are when routines break, when neighborhoods empty, when the people who watch know exactly which houses are dark and which doors are easy. If you've had an experience that still haunts you, something that happened when you thought you were safe, you can share it through the link in the description. Your story might be next. Thank you for listening to Almost Alone. Stay warm, stay aware. And if you feel like someone's watching, it's usually because they are.